Landwehr has a number of clients where we are responsible for the cybersecurity. Cybersecurity can be very technical and is very technical, and we help out our clients with that. But there is also the non-tech side of cybersecurity, and we get asked a number of questions around this. What's the kind of main questions we get asked relating to cybersecurity, but not tech related?
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. You know, cybersecurity isn't just about the kind of the technical operational side. It's all about the other areas, such as kind of your policies, your procedures, your kind of risk management framework. We find that a lot of our clients really struggle, with those elements because they've got a company like Landwehr that does a good job around the kind of technical cybersecurity and all that, and so then that means that the other side around the policies and procedures they don't necessarily have a clear solution for. And what's interesting is the biggest gap we see across the board is a risk assessment. So if you're a regulated business, FCA regulated, you must conduct a cybersecurity risk assessment on an annual basis and have a treatment plan to address any of those risks. And so this is an area where a lot of the time they're going to come to us for, because they tend to be relatively small businesses, and they're not going to have someone who's a kind of a chief information security officer who's very familiar with what's known as kind of governance, risk and compliance, to help them with all this. So that tends to be the main gap, if that makes sense, that we get asked around.
What are the solutions then to make all of that happen?
Well, the conducting a risk assessment, can be done a million different ways, and it's not just about doing a risk assessment related to cyber risks that pertain internally to your business. You've also got to do it around your key critical suppliers. And that adds a lot of complexity because it normally involves obviously having to go to those suppliers with some form of kind of questionnaire that they have to fill out, which can be very time consuming and often almost impossible, particularly if one of your vendors is some big data provider like Bloomberg. They're just not going to do it. Inevitably, a lot of this ends up on spreadsheets and people trying to do it themselves. But there are tools out there specifically for this, so risk assessment tools and tools that have a lot of those vendors sort of preloaded on them as well, such that they've already actually done a level of the risk assessment around them, and you can then just refresh that and update that. So there's definitely tools out there. We have one that we use, and it automates a lot of this area, and it gives them that pre-packaged risk management methodology, treatment plan, and library of vendors, that they can then kind of manage as a sort of a wider information security program on an annual basis.
Are these vendors sector specific, or are they kind of generalist solutions?
So in our world, very much sector specific, and it has to be because, if you think how many vendors are out there in the world that companies use, even whittling those down into financial services and furthermore into fund management, you've got to get that list as small as possible, really, to have any chance of a provider of this kind of risk management platform to maintain this kind of library. So yes, they are very much sector specific, and I would actually say they are kind of super specific, if that makes sense, in the fact that they only work within fund management, and that's the key, if that makes sense. But if you're using a platform that's got a preloaded library of vendors that all their kind of customers use, then that's half the battle and the challenge that's been addressed.
There's something to mention here around is there safety in numbers? If it's sector specific and you can compare yourself against others, is there safety in numbers around risk?
Well, of course, this, the more that you can, because, cybersecurity and risk, that varies immensely from industry to industry, business to business, and everyone will have their own risk appetite. So it's extremely useful, actually, to be able to compare yourself. Everyone wants to know what everyone else is doing and try and get benchmarks. So I would always suggest that a really important kind of feature of these tools is that kind of benchmarking comparison piece, because whilst you might have a certain risk appetite, sometimes it's very useful to know what the market's risk appetite is, particularly if they're similar sized firms as yourself, because there's this thing known as proportionality, particularly from the regulator's point of view, is that they're not going to expect you to accept all the same risks that, for example, a big bank would, or vice versa. You know, they do, certainly the FCA caters for that. You know, they understand that small firms can take on a bit more risk. There's a bit more flexibility there. So if you've got a tool that compares you to similar sized firms, with similar sized assets under management, really useful to give you that confidence around your own risk appetite and what risks you should or shouldn't accept.